Picture this. You are standing in the packed central plaza of a 16th century Spanish city. The air is thick with the smell of sweat and smoke, and the murmur of 1,000 voices. Your eyes are drawn to a raised platform, a theater of fear. Upon it, figures in coarse yellow robes, the Sanbenitos, marked with the cross of heresy. Among them your eyes lock with a woman. Her face is pale, her spirit broken, but in her eyes a flicker of defiance. What crime did she commit? Knowledge? Independence? Or simply the misfortune of being a woman in the wrong place, at the wrong time? We are told the Inquisition was a brutal force for religious purity. But history has often glossed over a darker, more sinister truth. It was also a war on women. A systematic campaign of terror designed to break the spirit, erase knowledge, and enforce subjugation through punishments so horrifying they were whispered about for centuries. This is not a story of distant, abstract heresy. This is a story of flesh and blood, of fear and power. We will venture into the shadowy dungeons and courtrooms of the Holy Office to uncover the suppressed, gendered reality of its terror. What you are about to witness will rewrite everything you thought you knew about this dark chapter. The truth has been waiting in the silence. To understand the terror, we must first step into its world. Imagine the year is 1580. The Spanish Empire is at its zenith, a global superpower forged by the sword and the cross. But beneath the gleaming facade of cathedrals and royal palaces, a different kind of war is being waged, a war for the human soul. This is a world policed by fear. The air in a typical town is a cacophony of smells, baking bread, animal waste, and the ever-present incense from the church. But the most potent smell is the intangible one of suspicion. Your neighbor could be your accuser. A misspoken word over a market stall could be twisted into heresy. The Holy Office of the Inquisition was not just a religious body. It was the ultimate secret police. Its power absolute, its reach endless. Its primary target? Anyone who threatened the rigid social and religious order. And at the intersection of piety, power, and paranoia stood women. To justify this focus, the Inquisition wielded a terrifying text, the Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches. Published in 1487, this book was a misogynist's manifesto, a bestseller of bigotry that became the unofficial handbook for inquisitors. Its central thesis was as simple as it was insane. All witchcraft comes from carnal lust, which in women is insatiable. It argued that women were inherently weaker, more susceptible to the devil's seduction, and more likely to be witches. This wasn't theology. It was institutionalized gynophobia, giving intellectual cover to raw prejudice. The Malleus is a deeply biased source, a work of propaganda that reveals far more about the fears of the men who wrote it than the women they accused. But in this climate, propaganda was law. And the law was designed to make women its primary prey. So, what made a woman a target? In the eyes of the Inquisition, the line between a heretic and a healer, a witch and a widow, was terrifyingly thin. The gaze of suspicion fell most heavily on those who existed outside the narrow confines of male control. If you were a woman who knew too much, who owned property, who was too old, too beautiful, or too isolated, you were vulnerable. Were you a curandera, a healer, using knowledge of herbs passed down through generations to ease childbirth or cure a fever? To the inquisitors, your ancient wisdom was not medicine. It was diabolical sorcery. A successful cure could be proof of a pact with the devil. A failure? Proof of God's displeasure with your witchcraft. You could not win. Were you a conversar, a Jewish or Muslim convert to Christianity, or even the descendant of one? Your purity of blood was always in question. Any private devotion, lighting candles on a Friday, avoiding pork, could be twisted by a malicious neighbor into evidence of secret Judaizing or Moorish practices. Your very identity was a crime waiting to be discovered. Were you an independent widow, managing your late husband's estate? Or an outspoken woman who challenged a man? Your autonomy was an affront to the natural order, a rejected suitor, a jealous rival, a disgruntled debtor. Any of them could anonymously slip a denunciation into the boozer, the secret mailbox of the Inquisition. Your name, once written on that slip of paper, was as good as a death sentence. The system was designed to encourage these accusations, turning society against itself, weaponizing petty grievances into matters of eternal damnation. The question was never if you would be accused, but when. The accusation was only the beginning. The real horror commenced the moment the doors of the secret prison sealed shut behind you. This was the Inquisition's true masterpiece of psychological terror, a process designed not just to punish the body, but to annihilate the will. Your world shrank to a cold, dark, solitary cell. You were given no information, no charge, no sense of time. This was the terror of the unknown, a slow, grinding torture meant to disorient and breed despair. The silence was broken only by the distant screams of other prisoners, a grim chorus reminding you of your fate. When your interrogators finally came, the questions were circular, designed to trap you in contradictions. Your every word was meticulously recorded by a notary, creating a permanent record of your supposed guilt, and if words failed them, they turned to the tools of their trade. The stated goal was always to elicit a confession, the queen of proofs, but the unstated goal was to break you completely. Imagine the strappado, your hands bound behind your back. You are hoisted by a pulley high into the air, your shoulders dislocating with a sickening pop under your own body weight. They would then drop you suddenly, but stop you just short of the floor. The jolt sending agony through your entire frame, or the toca, or water torture. You are forced onto a rack, a cloth forced down your throat. Cold water is poured relentlessly onto the cloth, creating the unbearable primal sensation of drowning. Your body convulses, believing it is dying. Over and over again, inquisitorial manuals, like those of Nicolaus Eymerich, coldly detailed these techniques, framing them as a merciful alternative to the mutilating practices of secular courts. But the clinical language is a lie. The transcripts themselves often note the sounds, the screams, the sobs, the pleas for death. The machinery of terror was meticulous, and for the women who endured it, the dungeon became the entire world. For those who confessed under torture, or who were simply found guilty by the court, the final act of the Inquisition's theater of cruelty was a public spectacle, the auto da fe, the act of faith. This was where private torment was transformed into public humiliation, a lesson for all to see. If you were reconciled, you might be condemned to wear the sambenito, that infamous yellow sackcloth tabard, painted with red crosses and devils, for the rest of your life. You and your descendants were marked, shunned, your name forever tainted. It was a social death sentence. But for those deemed unrepentant or for relapsed heretics, the sentence was far more horrific. You were relaxed to the secular arm, a legal fiction that allowed the church to avoid directly spilling blood, with a firm recommendation for mercy. The secular authorities never refused the recommendation. You were paraded through the streets amidst the jeering crowds. The procession ended at the quemadero, the burning place. Here you would be bound to a stake. For the truly penitent, a small mercy. A bag of gunpowder was tied around the neck to ensure a quick death. For the defiant, the fire was slow, an agonizing end meant to purge the community of your spiritual pollution. The most chilling accounts come not from the Inquisition's own records, which are sterile, but from foreign diplomats and travelers who witnessed these events. They wrote of the stark contrast, the festive atmosphere of the crowd, the solemn prayers of the priests, and the silent, resigned terror of the victims, often women, engulfed by the flames. The smell of smoke and searing flesh hanging over the city was the final brutal message from those in power: conform or be erased. The screams have long faded, but the silence they left behind echoes through history. The pyres are cold ash now. The dungeons are silent, empty museums. But the story of the Inquisition's war on women is not a relic. It is a stark lesson in how power, when fused with fanaticism and fear, will always seek to control, to subjugate, and to break those it perceives as a threat. The palaces of kings and popes may shine in our history books, but we must never forget the torture chambers that lay hidden in their shadows. This was not about faith. It was about control. Control over women's bodies, their knowledge, their independence, and their very souls. It was a system perfected over centuries, a machine that fed on prejudice and paranoia, and it feasted on the blood of the vulnerable. We condemn these acts, utterly and completely, as crimes against humanity. We must ask ourselves, where do these echoes of intolerance still resonate today? Where are the modern Sambanitos, the digital denunciations, the whispered campaigns against the outsider? History's darkest patterns repeat when we choose to look away. This channel is dedicated to pulling back the curtain on those shadows. If this journey into the heart of darkness has shocked you, if it has made you think, then hit the like button. Share this video to shed light on this suppressed history. And tell us in the comments, which part of this horrifying process do you think was the most effective tool of terror? Was it the loneliness of the cell, the agony of the rack, or the final public humiliation? Subscribe and turn on notifications to join us as we continue to uncover history's darkest, most hidden chapters. We are not here to glorify the darkness, but to understand it, so that we may never again be condemned to repeat it. History remembers the crowns of kings and the edicts of popes. But if you listen closely to the silence, you can still hear the cries that echoed beneath them. Disclaimer: this documentary is for educational purposes only. It does not promote hatred or violence. These acts are condemned as grave injustices of history.